If you'll all please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Good evening, and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of February 27th, 2019. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Actually, before we proceed, Robin, to public comment, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge the passing of Mark Law. The news came to us today. For those of you who have had the pleasure of knowing Mark, you know, as our city arborist, he made a tremendous contribution to us as a city. He was a well-thought-of man, a well-spoken man, a Christian man, and delivered the kinds of things that as you pass through Milton, I hope we can remember Mark for all of our future. For the good that he did in protecting our rural viewshed and helping us to create the standards of Milton by which we measure each day how we create the look and feel for our future, the things that we enjoy today and the legacy that we all hope to leave behind as well. I hope in my days to come I can leave a legacy as powerful as Mark Law's. We get to enjoy the new Arboretum at Bell Memorial Park in Mark's honor as a living something you can touch and see that will live on in Mark's legacy. And I hope you all, if you've not been there, will take the opportunity to go see that. But I hope you'll join me in a moment of silence and in sadness and in prayer in the pain and suffering I know Mark's family is now going to endure in his passing. But I hope they will take the same rejoice that we do in knowing Mark lived a life well lived, and he's now in a place of eternal happiness. So please take a moment. Thank you. So the first item on our agenda this evening is public comment. This is the time for the community. If you have something that you would like to speak to address to us this evening that is not addressed in our stated agenda, this is the opportunity for that. Robin, do we have any public comment this evening?
I do not have any cards for public comment. And also just let you know, I'm a one-person show here, so if you have any comment cards, just bring them up to me for the items on the agenda. So, great.
Sir, did you have a comment that you'd like to make? We can certainly have you fill out a comment card after if you'd like to approach.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it for the rezoning or is it a general comment?
It's for rezoning.
Then you give me a card.
And variance requested.
Right, and so you need to give me a card and we'll call you up when it's time.
What kind of card is that?
It's over there, the yellow card on the table. So you'll have plenty of time to fill it out.
Okay, anyone else who would care to speak this evening into the record that addresses the topic that's not on our agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. So the first item on our agenda this evening is actually the election of officers. Every year during the February timing, if we're hosting a meeting, it's time for us to elect a new chair and vice chair. So Robin and Paul, I think you would plan to choreograph that.
Thank you. You can do it, Paul. That'd be great.
At this point in the meeting, we will open up the meeting for the acceptance of nominations for the chair and the vice chair. We'll start with the chair.
I'd like to nominate Paul Moore.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. You may vote. Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Ron Gilbert as vice chair.
Okay.
Or is that a separate?
Separate.
Okay, never mind.
Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay, seeing none, we'll take the vote on the election of chairman. You may vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Seeing none, it's unanimous. We'll now open up the, Paul Moore has been elected as the chairman. We'll now open up the meeting to accept nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Ron Gilbert as vice chair.
I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll take a vote for vice chair.
Aye.
All in favor of electing Ron Gilbert as vice chair? That's 5 in favor. And seeing none in opposition, it's unanimous.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your continued confidence in my chairmanship. Look forward to being able to continue to contribute at a level that will serve the position well. Thank you. Okay, Robin, if you would please, I guess the next item on the agenda is the approval of the action minutes for the December 19th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Any comments or concerns about the minutes as they've been presented to us by staff? Has everybody received the corrected or the updated minutes? It was simply in addition to the last motion that we put before the mayor and council. Some additional language is added to that. Hearing none, may I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are adopted. Thank you. Is there a pen?
Okay. The first item is text amendment, RZ 1901, amendment to section 64.1, definitions.
Robin,
and-
I'm sorry, I have to read my
Oh, that's
chairman's
right.
statement. Thanks, Mark.
Head of my horse here.
Okay, because we have a couple of items on the agenda this evening and we have public here to participate, it's appropriate that I read the basically a meeting conduct statement. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm Paul Moore, chairperson. This is a seven-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan, plan map, and other related plans and amendments to the zoning ordinance. I'd like to introduce the members of our commission who are present this evening. To my left, Samit Shah, Kurt Nolte, myself, Paul Moore. To my right, Mark Bittner, and Ron Gilbert. Absent this evening are Fred Edwards and Chris Doty. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the proposed agenda. I'd like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position as well. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains within the allotted time. The staff of the Community Development Department will be keeping track of the time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Each speaker must fill out a speaker card before speaking and leave it with a staff member of the Community Development Department. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure within the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Each application has been properly filed with the Department of Community Development. Signs have been posted on each site. The matter has been advertised and the notices have been mailed to property owners affected by this zoning as required by the Milton zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be forwarded to the City of Milton Mayor and City Council for final disposition. The Mayor and City Council hearing will be held approximately 3.5 weeks from this hearing on the third Monday of each month at 6 p.m. in these council chambers. The Community Development Department has reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, both internal and external to the city. Staff's recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, which has been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, dialogue with the person speaking, or outburst. Please turn off all your cell phones or place them on silent. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you will expect to receive yourself. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the Planning Commission during the meeting unless requested to do so by the Commission. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the Commission in consideration of your application should be submitted to the staff of the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the Commission. Finally, to the applicant, if your petition is deferred in accordance with the Milton Zoning Ordinance, you are required to update or obtain a new sign for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in further delay, and there are no exceptions. And we've actually already covered public comment, which is normally the next step in the process, so my apologies for taking that out of order. So now, Robin, if you would please sound the first item on the agenda.
Okay, so first item is RZ 1901, text amendment to section 64.1, definitions, and section 64.395, uses prohibited in all zoning districts as it relates to vape shops. So the purpose of this text amendment is to prohibit vape shops entirely within the city of Milton. The amendment attached includes a definition of vape shops as well as the prohibition of vape shops in all zoning districts. Currently, there is only one shop that operates within the city limits and is located at 631 North Main Street on Highway 9. This business will be allowed to continue to operate as it was in existence prior to the adoption of these proposed regulations. The reason for this text amendment is that recently in our area, the use of marijuana substitutes has caused several of our city's teens and the need to seek urgent medical attention after ingestion. Though currently legal, these largely unregulated products typically sold in convenience stores or vape shops contain ingredients that are known to be harmful. On July 19, 2018, the United States Food and Drug Administration issued a warning related to these products. Accordingly, the FDA said there are a number of synthetic marijuana products being illegally marketed and used for their psychoactive effects. The FDA has previously worked with the drug DEA to place several synthetic cannabinoids into Schedule I of the Controlled Substance Act to avoid an imminent hazard to public safety. Generally, these products have been known to be associated with adverse effects, including rapid heart rate, vomiting, violent behavior, and suicidal thoughts, and an increase in blood pressure, as well as causing reduced blood supply to the heart, kidney damage, and seizures. By prohibiting new vape shops, these will hopefully assist in limiting the ongoing purchase and ingestion of these types of products. So obviously, by the big red amendment, we've never had a definition for vape shops, and that was a need. We have some of our police officers here to explain kind of the other side of the coin from the police side, because we're working concurrently to try to alleviate these problems. So, but just from the zoning perspective, a vape shop means any business whose primary product line for retail sale is alternative nicotine products or vape juice or both. Alternative nicotine products refer to any products or devices that employ an electronic heating element, power source, electronic circuit, battery, or other electronic chemical or mechanical means to produce a vapor that delivers nicotine to the person inhaling from the device, including e-cigarettes, e-cigars, e-hookahs, e-bongs, and e-pipes, whether manufactured, distributed, marketed, or sold as an e-cigarette, e-cigar, or e-pipe. Vape juice refers to any liquid that contains compounds containing pharmaceutical-grade vegetable glycerin, propylene, glycol, nicotine, food-grade flavoring, and water, and can be used for vaping by means of an alternative nicotine product. For purposes of this code section, primary shall mean that alternative nicotine products, vape juice, or both constitute at least 50% of the business's aggregate retail sales. The second part of our ordinance amendment is something that already exists, and use is prohibited in all zoning districts. Currently, In all zoning districts, the following uses are considered objectionable and are prohibited: fortune-telling establishment, massage parlor, pool hall, escort and dating services, and we're adding vape shops, and tattoo and body art or piercing establishment. And so this is what we're proposing for the changes in our zoning ordinance, and I'll be happy to answer any zoning-related items, but as I said, we have some of our police officers here to kind of give a background about why we're pursuing this type of legislation. And just to let you know, it's been reviewed by our city attorney, because actually a very similar amendment has been made in Forsyth County they've done a lot of work toward this as well. So with that said, do you want to hear from the police first?
Yeah, I think we should. That way
Okay.
we can get the full benefit of all the information we should be considering before going forward.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can go.
Sergeant Chelsea Walters. I am currently assigned to the Uniform Patrol Division at the City of Milton. Prior to that, I was assigned to the Criminal Investigations Division and worked a lot of these complaints that we get in reference to vape shops. And basically, I'm here to speak on why, as a police department, we support this initiative to exclude vape shops from zoning. In 2018, we do only have one vape shop as it stands. It had 2 burglaries in 2018. The burglaries target the high-value glass items that they have that are marketed as smoking devices. They're untraceable. So as it stands, we have 2 unsolved burglaries just in last year alone. Another reason, a couple of the reasons that we're interested in this is that whether intentional or not, the vape shops do promote drug use. They sell synthetic types of marijuana, synthetic types of opioids. They also sell things that are made to conceal drugs to hide from the police department. So whether intentional or not, they are promoting drug use. It also entices crime, as I spoke about, with the burglaries due to the high-value glass items that are untraceable. And it also attracts underage buyers by selling tobacco products, alternative tobacco products that are flavored, that are easy to conceal, that don't smell like nicotine. In addition, we've had multiple complaints about this particular vape shop selling to underage kids. And the amount of time and the resources that we spend netting these complaints and investigating these complaints is getting to be a lot for the police department. So based on these issues that we've had with the one vape shop, this is why, as the police department, we do support passing this zoning to prohibit any further vape shops. Are there any questions?
What is the age?
It's 18.
18.
You have to be 18.
And is that because of the nicotine component of it, or
Yes.
the other products that you listed as well, some of the other substances?
Everything should be marketed to 18 and above. I don't believe the purchase of glass pipes is prohibited, but I'm not 100% sure.
That's what I was going to ask you next. So we know that it's the nicotine products that are related to that, or things that can be considered consumable by the vape device. Is that a correct way to say that?
Yeah.
But the devices themselves are not regulated.
So the vape devices would be. The only thing I don't know is if the actual glass, like bongs, are age restricted.
Okay. All right. Is that something staff can look into, Robin, and see if it's not addressed already, that we should consider the deliverable device to be restricted as well, if it's not contemplated in the language that we had before us. And then, this is a lot for us to absorb, but
So typically, maybe the city attorney can address this, but we don't exclude in zoning things that are sold, but it may go over onto the, on the police side. Is that correct? I mean, to put exclusions to selling specific products?
I think that's right. And if I think I want to make sure I understand the question, though. The question is whether we can impose an age restriction on buying certain items at a vape shop specifically.
Well, it looks like by the description of some of the things being contemplated here, the e-pipes, the e-cigars, e-cigarettes, and then there was also a description let me say it differently. I want to make sure I'm bridging this properly. There was staff's description of the reason that we're doing it. And it talked about, the enforcement of some of the concern items. And I can go back to, synthetic marijuana products being illegally marketed and used for this psychoactive effects. Where was the section about the crystals or something to that effect? But you know what I'm referring to, I guess. Can we prohibit? I mean, there's things that are already illegal. That's not an issue. Things that are illegal but are related to this, that by loophole right now, because we haven't gotten to probably the depth of the legislation that will be forthcoming because this is a newer product on the market, can we be proactively going there? Or do we need to in our ordinance right now? And that's the first part of it.
Sure.
The second part of it is, can we by age or other method restrict the sale of any device, whether it's bong or glass device or the E-related, which are probably some sort of powered device because it has to create the
Correct,
vapor.
yeah.
Can we make sure that there is 18 or plus, but also minors can't buy that? So 2 parts.
Sure. With the caveat that I would want to look into a little bit further, perhaps, but no. Generally, through the zoning ordinance, as Robin alluded to, the fine detail that you're speaking to would probably be more appropriately addressed in a separate city ordinance and not as zoning.
In the zoning ordinance. Okay.
So if I could add something, we did recently pass a city ordinance to ban the sale of synthetic marijuana and synthetic opioids. But most of the other stuff is going to fall under an age restriction that's already in place due to state law.
Okay.
So state law will prohibit the sale to minors, which is what we have ticketed Vapor King for in the past, is for selling tobacco products to minors. The only thing I'm unclear on is if an actual glass bong has a sale age. Everything else does. All the vaporizers, all the products are for 18 and up, and they're age restricted. So if that kind of clears that up.
And I share your concern because and people are creative. They'll find a way to make something else work. If it's not the e-device to deliver it, there are probably other ways to do that.
Yeah.
And maybe it's simply an amendment to what we already have on the books to include a glass device used for the intent of consumption of those items. But we don't need to bring resolution to that today. But I think as you and the other members of the attorney staff are looking at this for the sake of Milton's, that we ask that you add that to your consideration.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other?
Yeah, I think this is great, but it focuses on primary. So what's to stop me from opening a vape counter in the Sunoco? I mean, it's not a primary, it's no longer a primary business.
Sergeant
You were saying we
can
can't
address
open a
that.
vape shop. Like, what stops us from the Sunoco or me opening something at the Queen of Hearts?
Or the grocery store.
Or the grocery store.
Yeah.
How do
We
we
could have it in the grocery store.
knock that out?
Yeah, so this ordinance is not going to prohibit that because I believe it's 50% of their sales must come from these products to be considered a vape shop, whereas gas stations obviously have sales in other areas. We have looked into banning it, but it's our understanding that we will not be able to fully ban the actual selling of vaporizer products. So that's why we're moving forward with stopping vape shops, because I don't get complaints about the gas stations. I get complaints about Vapor King selling to underage kids. The last time I did an underage buy, Vapor King was the only one that sold, and I went to every gas station in the city of Milton. Most of the gas stations around here have adopted an age restriction device on their computer where they have to physically scan a license. So if it's a fake ID, it won't scan. So they've taken proactive steps as gas stations to combat this problem on their own. But yeah, like I said, we do not get complaints about gas stations selling to minors.
Further to Mark's point, where he was focusing on the word primary, it's 50% or more being of their sales from these products. Why 50%? Why not 10% or 1%, so that we can virtually exclude this, even if we can't say no?
I mean, this verbiage came from the city attorney, so that was the percentage that was presented to us. So I'm not sure what the magic number is, but.
Paul, what's the legal rationale?
You know,
You knew this was coming.
You know, I mean, line drawing problems are problems about drawing where the line's supposed to go.
Yes.
Certainly, you know, you're free to make a recommendation to have that line moved one way or the other. I can't really say much more than that as for the rationale for picking the 50% number. There may very well be more to that, so I'll look into that.
Thank you.
Well, I think from a procedural standpoint, there's nothing that would prohibit us from amending that number in the recommendation that we put forward to the mayor and council for adopting this ordinance or this text amendment as presented by the staff. So, unless there's some legal grounding, Paul, that between now and the mayor and council meeting that is presented that would undermine our attempt to create a lower number theoretically, if that's where the motion were to go.
I'll just say that there may very well be, and unfortunately, I'm not ready to speak on that. For instance, if the state of Georgia is already occupying the field, so to speak, is already regulating this, then, and I just simply don't know that answer. If there is already a threshold that the state has imposed, in other words, that we couldn't go below that number, so that I can find out the answer to that question, though.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think there's two issues here. One is the standalone vape shop, which I understand the underage sales and everything is the police issue or causes police issues. But then there's the whole description that was written above here, all the health issues that it causes. So if I can't buy it from a standalone vape shop, like we're talking about, Kroger could have 4 aisles of vapeware and it would still fit this definition. So I think, do we have to look at something that goes further as far as the devices themselves or the vaping themselves, not just focused on the vape shop? Because again, this is in my world, this is going to do very little to prevent the use and the spread of vaping. So they'll just go to the gas station or wherever and do it. And I think, as a society, we probably want to do more to be more proactive in that way of how do we prevent access to this, if that's even possible. Again, I don't know what our jurisdiction is or how we do that, but I do think, I'm assuming that 50% is because that defines a vape shop. If it's 10%, if it's a gas station does 10%, then it's, So again, I think I think it's a good start. And, then how do we discourage use overall, not just focus on a vape shop?
Well, I think I can see a little bit of problem. Let's say if you suggested a 10%, then it really isn't a vape shop. I mean, it doesn't totally meet that definition in the sense of, I guess, the counter of that is a gas station. I mean, what is the percentage of it? I mean, we don't really
there's
know
no way
what
to
their
pull a
retail
number
sales
out.
are. We don't,
Truthfully.
And I think to the sergeant's point is that we have had discussions within our staff talking about exactly that issue. Well, how do we avoid people purchasing it? And we even came up with that idea. Can we eliminate those devices? And at this point, it appears that we can't really do that. I think it comes through the enforcement of 18 and not to sell to people not 18 and over. Now, to be honest, I know that some shops, some places actually want you to be 21 and they won't sell it to you. But that's not a law, but that's their practice. So, I mean, we can definitely do some more research. I just would be hesitant. I mean, you can make a recommendation and I can put that forward, but I would be hesitant to change that percentage in the actual amendment because I think it's there for a reason, and until such time I figure it out, or we figure it out, to understand why it's that way.
I'll give you an example of my own personal experience with it recently, and it's not because I was in a shop that would be determined to be a vape shop, but it was a simple social media exchange that I witnessed take place in our community. It was a Milton-supported site on Facebook, and there was a celebration of the opening of the new little shop on Hopewell, across from Bell Memorial Park. And there was a snapshot of the business owner standing at the counter, and the thread started by saying, "Isn't this great? This is finally open. We've been looking for something like this for a long time." And we know we've all worked very hard on trying to define what that business could or couldn't be. Over the proprietor's or the worker's shoulder was a sign that simply said, "Nicotine and other stuff." I don't have the exact recollection of what it was, but it implied that there were nicotine and nicotine-type devices coming in the near future. Well, the thread exploded. It went from, one or two comments to several hundred in a matter of a couple of hours, including some of our Milton neighbors talking about boycotting this brand new store that's just opened. It hasn't had a chance to, have a week's worth of sales, and they're prepared to close it because of their concern for underage consumption or the availability of that kind of substance and the delivering devices in our community. So that's the kind of energy that's out there behind this. So I don't think by taking any step that we can to ensure that we take it to the nth degree, we will not be underserving our community by that one example alone. That's the only one I can refer to, but I think it was a pretty good litmus test for what our community is prepared to consider or tolerate.
And if I could, it's my understanding that this ordinance, whether it's adopted at 50% or 10%, is not going to take away the vape products that are currently in the gas stations and in Walmart and in Publix and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think our main issue does come from the vape shop, and that's why this ordinance is targeted towards any future vape shops, because like I said, those are where our problems come from. Our problems aren't coming from the gas stations. Our complaints aren't coming from the gas stations. We don't have parents calling being like, my kid said Vapor King is where they go to get all their stuff.
Yep.
So that's why we are specifically looking at that, because this is the problem that we've had.
Yep.
So unfortunately, it is still going to be out there, but it's our hopes. Forsyth County just adopted a similar ordinance. We're trying to adopt one, so it's our hope that it'll just continue down, and hopefully it'll restrict the access to it. And these companies have been doing things to market their products differently so that it's not targeted towards children anymore. They've removed their flavored products. Juul it's a specific brand, has removed their flavored products from stores, while others still continue to sell it, but Juul is the largest seller of this at the moment. So they're taking steps. They have imposed the 21 and over on their website. So they're taking steps because they realize the heat that they're getting about this right now. But that is why we're looking at prohibiting further vape shops, because lowering it might prohibit any future gas stations or any future country stores or anything like that. So that's why we're specifically looking at vape shops.
Yeah, I think your comments just prompted my memory. I think part of the energy that on the thread that I was referring to came from the fact that the statement that was being posted about the products that were forthcoming was actually framed in a Juul.
Yeah, it was. I went up there the day that all that came out on Facebook, and I told him, I was like, listen, this is what they're saying, and he was like, okay.
Yeah.
So
He took your advice and
I don't know. He seemed receptive.
From what I understand, they've pulled it, or they're not going to have it. I
He
went by there
didn't
a couple
have
weeks.
it. Yeah, he didn't have it at the time I was there. I don't know if he's going to continue, but
Yeah.
And Robin, it's my assumption correct? The fact that we already have a vape shop, we can't legislate against the existing one. We can only enforce going forward any additional ones. But in this enforcement, if that vape shop were to change its composure in any way, it would then be prohibited any further.
We had similar situation. We had one technically massage parlor that was in before we made that exclusion, and what we allowed was if it was a continued use, and even if it changed ownership, but it never stopped being a vape shop or a massage parlor, we allowed it to continue. So it would really have to stop its operation for a certain amount of time before it would fall out of the,
And so we're bound by that similar application of the ordinance or law to that
right.
Okay.
I believe so, yes.
by precedent, Paul, or because that's just how our ordinance reads?
Oh, that's typical.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's a 6-month time span that if you're not operating it, it's a 6-month time span for like a occupational license.
Is there any reason we couldn't raise the age to 21? I mean, is that the state law? But I mean, I know like cities can have like wine and beer only or be dry. I mean, why can't we change our age here to make it 21?
That's something I would want to look into a little bit. I could probably get a quick answer.
Okay.
Okay, I just encourage us, as we're creating our motion this evening, that we contemplate some of these suggestions be rolled into the motion for staff and city attorney to consider. Any other questions for staff or attorneys or Sergeant
Is
Walter?
Forsyth County 50% as well? Is that what they propose?
And this came from Forsyth County. I haven't read their exact, a lot of the legislation came directly replicating it, so I'm assuming
believe that's
it
what
is.
theirs,
Yeah.
theirs prohibits as well. So as not to prohibit gas stations and stuff like that from opening.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Sergeant Walters, I think this is the first time we've had a member of our Milton Police Force in front of us this
Yeah.
evening, and just want to take a moment and say thank you for your service.
Thank
We
you.
know we are well served by the Milton Police Force. I know we receive accolades both locally as well as nationally for the strength and accomplishment of our police force, and we really do appreciate what you do and putting yourself in harm's way to ensure our safety every single day. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So at this point, if there's no further questions or comments or discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to move that we approve.
Actually, Ron, may I, one more quick thought.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I have my own, in fostering the other discussion, I have a question of my own I left out. Robin, in the listing in the red text for consideration, where it's talking about including e-cigarettes, e-cigars, et cetera, is there a reason that it's just that list, or would we be better served to include language that says "but not limited to"? So, in case there's any other iteration of that forthcoming, that we would have the ability to apply to that too.
I'll just say that the language was carefully crafted and chosen. You run into a problem if it's too ambiguous, then you have an enforcement problem.
Okay.
So, just as with the line drawing problem, there's also a problem of what you're going to include and what you're not going to include. But you want to make sure you at least hit the target that you know is out there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
The other question I had, or right now we've got it listed as like e-cigarettes, e-cigars, but should we actually say electronic? Because E is not defined. We don't know. I don't know if anybody could say, well, what's that? Versus saying electronic cigarettes, electronic cigars, electronic hookahs, electronic whatever. That would be a suggestion I would have. The other couple suggestions that I would have for this would be that just like either we italicize, it's got vape shop that way, but if we want to do the same for vape juice and alternative nicotine products, or put them in quotes or something like that, so that way we can say that this is going to be the definition after that.
So, the reason why I have it italicized is that's the definition for that. So then we'd have to start doing other definitions if if you're trying to, I believe, it would make it more simpler if you had multiple definitions within a definition. So,
Or put quotes, or we could even say, just like kind of you did where for primary, we could even say for purposes of this code section, alternative nicotine products, shall mean or shall refer to, et cetera, to any products or devices. Same thing for vape juice. So that way we can just, it stands out and you've clearly defined what it is within, what you're meaning for vape shop. That would be my suggestion. And then the only other question I had was about the word, again, I understand it's a vapor, so can it only be through inhaling? Or is there any other way, or should we even use that word inhaling in there? That's on the 6th line, or it just delivers nicotine to the person. Again, I don't know if there's some other way of doing this that I don't want to just restrict it to just like inhaling it. I don't know.
Just strike, you could actually have that same sentence
Without the
striking the
word
word inhaling.
Yeah, exactly.
I can answer that. So no, there's no other way to take in a vapor other than inhaling it. So that's why that's specific to that.
Okay.
So maybe you're thinking about like if you have chewing tobacco, is that the
Yeah, I mean, like
sense
straight,
of?
like ingesting it. I don't know if that is considered inhaling versus, you know.
I think because we're specifically talking about items that produce a vapor, the only way to get that into your body is to inhale it.
Okay. Thank you. Samit, anything else?
No, I think that's
Okay. Kurt?
Nope.
Okay. Mark? All right, Ron, I interrupted your motion.
I was about to. Now I'm concerned I'm not going to be able to capture what Sumit offered up. But let me try. And Sumit, help me out.
Yeah.
I move that we recommend RZ 19-01 text amendment regarding vape shops with recommendation to council that they consider lowering the percentage definition of what constitutes a vape shop, consider increasing the age for purchase to 21, and that in the definition, the word electronic be used in lieu of E in describing the various products. Sumit, did I catch it?
Yeah, I mean, the only friendly amendment I would make to that, again, is to somehow basically either add in the words like, for purposes of this section, alternative nicotine products refers to, et cetera. For purposes of this section, vape juice refers to, you know, kind of like the way that they've done at the end, where it says, for purposes of this section, we've defined what primary constitutes.
Okay, can we just use that as amendment to my motion?
Absolutely. And if you want to clarify what your amendment is, in other words, the specific terms that you would like to have specifically defined in the ordinance.
Sure. So basically, my amendment would be to add in the words for purposes of this section in front of alternative nicotine products starting on the second line. And then further add the words for purposes of this section in front of vape juice on the 8th line. And one other friendly amendment I would make, Ron, is that above, you know, they've put electronic cigarettes, cigars, hookahs, bongs, and pipes, but then it says distributed, marketed, or sold as an e-cigarette, e-cigar, or e-pipe, but they didn't put e-hookah or e-bong. So potentially adding those two in there as well.
Can we go back and ask for a second on your motion, and then we'll
Actually,
consider the amendment?
I just want to affirm, Ron, your motion is for approval with these conditions.
That's right.
You actually didn't use the word approval. but-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, approval.
Okay.
Is there a second for Ron's original
I'll
motion?
second that with Sumit's additions.
So, motion made by Ron, seconded by Mark, with the friendly amendments by Samit.
Okay.
We need
And then is there a second to the amendment?
okay,
I'll second it.
okay,
Okay, now we can vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the main motion.
okay. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's unanimous. And all those in favor of the second amendment, or is that what we're calling it?
Now we're voting on Ron's
Ron's
motion.
formal motion,
As amended.
as amended. Okay. So all those in favor of the motion made by,
Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? Okay.
Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thanks, Paul. That's challenging.
Okay.
So I think the message I've been to send, carry forward to the mayor and council is this is a great first step at this, but I think we look forward to, an aggressive, deeper cut at it if it's available to us. Thank you. All right, if you would sound the next item.
Okay, the next item is RZ 1814 VC 1809 347534.
Robin.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Do we need to vote on the change for section 64-395?
It's all, yeah, that's probably a good idea just to be safe. We can go ahead and, go ahead and make a motion for that section.
All right, I'll entertain a motion for section 64-395, uses prohibited in all zoning districts.
Second.
Oh,
Never mind.
I'll make the motion that section 64-395 is approved, uses prohibited all zoning districts.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Smeet.
Okay, this is RZ 1814 VC 1809 on Bethany Bend by Bayesian American Properties to rezone from TR and AG1 to TR to develop 54 residential units at a density of 6.38 units per acre and a 3-part concurrent variance to 1, delete the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback and replace with a 20-foot landscape buffer or 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer along adjacent to all property lines abutting property zone townhouse residential. Number 2, to delete requirement for 75% per vertical wall plan of brick or natural stone. And 3, to delete requirement for 25% brick, tile, and remaining materials listed. So let me, first of all, is there anybody who needs to turn in any cards? So you can just bring it up and leave it on the table. So I'm playing multiple people, so thank you. So this is a bit of a review, and I think it's the first time in 12 years that we've had something to be brought back to the Planning Commission after you've heard it, but there's always a time for a first time. So, as you remember, the Planning Commission met on December 19th and recommended approval conditional of RZ 1814 and Part 1 of VC 1809 and denial of Parts 1 and 2 in a 5-to-1 vote. Since that point in time, additional project information was discovered after this meeting in December, and to allow further evaluation of the revised site plan submitted on January 16th of 2019, the City Council, at its January 23rd meeting, remanded back this request to the Planning Commission. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I'll review fairly quickly through this project. Again, located on Bethany Bend, total acreage 8.46. TR portion of it's approximately 4.94 acres, and the AG portion toward the northern portion of the property is AG1. There's 4 existing single-family residences and an outhouse that our applicant was kind enough to send pictures of. So it was really, thank you for that. And it wasn't even out in the hinterland. It was right there on Bethany Bend.
Has it been declared historical yet?
I know, exactly. Maybe he'll move it somewhere. No, I don't know. A portion of the overall site, 4.94 acres, had previously been rezoned in 2008, and I will review that in a little more detail in future slide. The future land use is a combination of multifamily residential and high-density residential 2 of resident, which means 5 units or more per acre, and the multifamily residential is basically a placeholder for that 20 units, that higher density, kind of more apartment type. But we don't have that designation anywhere else in the city. And finally, this property is within the State Route 9 overlay district and not in the Deerfield form-based code. Again, I described the different requests in the introduction, so I won't bore you with that again. This is the location. Again, it's right here, the combination of TR and AG1 toward the north. There's Milton Montessori. Across the street is Deerfield Township, which is a mixed-use development under construction. Hidden Forest, this is the cul-de-sac portion that's closest to the subject site, the single-family product. This is some of the original townhomes built prior to the incorporation of Milton. So those tend to be over in this back area. And then finally, I did mention the Milton Montessori that was expanded and built a beautiful building in the last couple of years, and that is zoned O&I. Going back to the prior projects, the same applicant who's owned the property since the end of 2008, they came in requesting a use permit and a rezoning from AG1 to TR for a use permit for senior housing, requested a concurrent variance for setback for a swimming pool. And this is a portion that was not talked about at the last December meeting, did not request the required 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback. And then approved for 98 senior housing units at 19.84 units per acre and 2 stories, and subsequently, a couple of years later, they got a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals to go up to 3 stories. I just want to make sure that for you to understand that this requirement for the 75-foot undisturbed buffer came about in April of 2008. And I think I gave you all some background about that. It was initiated back in 2007, September or so, and it was deferred for 6 months, along with some other text amendments that had to do with the State Route 9 overlay district. So it wasn't just that item. And what precipitated that was wanting to be consistent with what was known as the Northwest Overlay District. So if you had a church or a school that was adjacent to AG1 or residential products, then we would require these 75-foot buffer, 10-foot improvement setback for those properties more than 4 acres, and for less it was 50 and 10. And another question had come up about what was previously required, and what was previously required before this 2008 amendment was if it didn't matter what the acreage of the property was. If it was a rear property line, it was 40 feet. If it was a side property line, it was 25 feet undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback. So that's just, and I apologize for that oversight, and we will keep on going on. So then subsequent to that, in 2014, the same applicant and owner came before us with a request of rezoning from AG1 and TR to TR for 76 townhomes at 7.47 units per acre. That time I got the concurrent variance for the 75-foot buffer and improvement setback and reduced open space. At that point in time, the applicant withdrew, I believe, right before the Planning Commission. So it did not go to council for a hearing. Again, the current zoning is TR. It encourages usable open space and recreation areas located primarily in or adjacent to single family, provides a transition between single family and non-residential areas, located near retail shopping and major thoroughfares, encourages home ownership, allows duplex, triplex, quadplex, and townhouse up to 9 units per acre. And obviously AG1 current zoning allows individual parcels devoted to residential use, agricultural, and closely related uses, and requires 1 acre lots. In regards to the future land use, like I mentioned before, it's split. This kind of ugly pea green is the multifamily residential, where the original zoning for the almost 20 units per acre was. And then the high density 2 is the very dark brown at 5 or more units per acre. And the TR district is compatible with that zoning district. So I'm not going to go into a lot of this detail of the October 30th, but you saw that at the last Planning Commission meeting. But we're going to go on to the next slide, which shows the revised site plan submitted on January 16th. In this site plan, it increased the landscape buffer from 20 feet to 35 feet adjacent to these single-family houses here on this eastern property line, up this way and across, and then it decreases down to 20 to 30 feet as you come around south of the Spring Valley townhomes here. So then it created one continuous row that was originally two sections right here. So in the last site plan, there was a little separation between this series of buildings, but this is still in compliance with the TR district as far as the number of townhomes together. And this site plan, you all asked at the last meeting to provide, the applicant to provide additional parking for visitors. As far as I see, this does not contemplate any additional visitor parking. Also, one of the items that we asked for was a detailed landscape buffer plan, so you can see that this is beefed up in the landscape plan. Our arborist has reviewed the plan and has stated that that it offers the buffers show adequate density and spacing to provide a visual screen. Again, staff had suggested fencing, and in this plan there's no fencing, although I understand that that wasn't a huge, that the adjoining neighbors did not really say they wanted a fence, so the applicant can address that issue when they have their opportunity to speak. But this site plan does not show a fence at all. This is a cross-section of the landscape buffer plan. So it gives a little better kind of a perspective of what these buffers would look like in 3 different locations, right here, and right here. I'm only addressing additional department comments since the last meeting. The transportation engineer received a traffic memo, but additional information has been requested to evaluate access and peak hour modeling of roundabout operations. And it does not actually impact any conditions of zoning, but it's just what she had requested. From the city arborist, the proposed rezoning will be subject to the tree preservation ordinance, including recompense and tree density requirements. The updated arborist report, which was submitted for your review, appears to be accurate, and mitigation will not be required for the specimen trees in poor condition. Again, I'm going to only review the public involvement since the time of the last Planning Commission. I won't even actually go through what you all did because I believe you remember what you did. In Hidden Forest, since that Planning Commission meeting, the applicant met with 5 residents of Hidden Forest subdivision. And I believe almost all of them were single-family owners within that cul-de-sac, and I believe I forwarded you the exact positions where they lived. So the applicant met with the concerned property owners and showed them the drawings at length and walked their properties along the applicant's property line. 3 of the residents at the meeting live in the 3 houses at the end of the cul-de-sac, which is impacted by most of the proposed reduced buffer. The applicant stated Each of the homeowners was satisfied and even happy with the proposed detailed landscaping plan. Staff has received letters of support from the neighboring property owners since the time of the publishing of the report. So based on the applicant's site plans, revised site plan from January 16th, we offer the following considerations. Development standards as outlined in the staff report on pages 7 and 8 meet the TR standards. The applicant has submitted the required ESA. Staff notes that the floodplain is not shown on the site plan but it is shown on the edge of the northern, it does not show the floodplain on the northern edge of the site, but there's an insert of a FEMA map that shows where the floodplain kind of touches on that northern portion. Concurrent variances requires compliance with 1 through 4. And in regards to part 1, to delete the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and replace with a 20-foot, but subsequently they're showing the majority of it to be 35 feet. Staff states that the revised site plan received on the 16th of January shows a 35-foot landscape buffer adjacent to the single-family homes in the Hidden Forest. There are either 20 or 30-foot landscape buffer adjacent to the detention area on the north side and adjacent to Spring Valley Townhomes. 54 units at an overall density of 6.38. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan update and compatible with residential properties to the west and northwest. The site is comprised of 6 parcels of various sizes and shapes that create an 8.46 acre parcel that is narrow, odd-shaped, and contains approximately 1.4 acres of floodplain on the site. In regards to parts 2 and 3, as to the architectural requirements of brick or natural stone, this area of State Route 9 overlay not included in the Deerfield form-based codes approved by the City Council in 2015. The applicant is seeking to build a less heavy look of the predominantly brick and stone that is required for the overlay district. The applicant's architect has worked closely with the city architect to achieve the most appealing and updated design. So since that time in December, the applicant, I believe tonight, is prepared to show you more detailed information on that portion of the variance. I'm just going to go through to get to the conclusion. Our conclusion is basically the same as it was in December. Staff recommends approval conditional of the rezoning from AG1 and TR to TR, as well as Part 1 for the 75-foot buffer to be deleted and replaced with 20-foot or as appropriate as shown on the site plan that ranges from 20 feet up to 35 feet. And we still recommend denial of parts 2 and 3. I just want to make note in the recommended conditions of the 3A, how it reads. Provide a 35-foot landscape buffer adjacent to property zone TR, adjacent to Hidden Forest subdivision with single-family homes, 20-foot and 30-foot landscape buffer adjacent to detention area and Spring Valley Townhomes, as depicted on the revised site plan received on January 16th of 19. Design and plant selection shall be approved by the city arborist. So just if you intend to approve it, that's the exact language that is in coordination with the site plan and what they submitted.
So that's, Robin, if I'm reading 3A in my...
The latest version, I hopefully would have been the same, but
Yeah, my 3A, oh, you know what? I'm looking off the one.
I know, I kept on sending you some, but yeah, the latest one that I left on the
Is 3A from what you
dais.
presented to us tonight when we arrived,
Yes,
now reflecting that?
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to make you aware of that what was previously on it wouldn't have, if you so choose to approve it, it wasn't an accurate condition to reflect the site plan, so. And with that, my presentation is finished, and I'll be happy to answer any questions before I allow the applicant to have their time.
Anyone have any questions for staff?
Not at this point.
Yeah, not right now.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we'll move to the applicant. Thanks, Robin.
Okay, it may take a minute to get them set up and everything, so I think they brought a lot of,
Actually, then I will take the opportunity to just ask one quick question. So
Okay.
I think can you go back to your slide presentation?
yeah.
I think if you would just go from the tail end of the presentation, go to your last slide.
It doesn't like me. Okay, under recommended conditions or before that?
Go one, is this the last? This isn't the last one.
The last one?
It was in your summary when you were talking, you were painting a broad brushstroke of the things that were being considered. It was like a,
Okay, here it is. The standards of review,
nope, it was after that, I think.
conclusion.
Keep going. One more, please. Nope. I wanted to make sure that you made kind of a broad brushstroke statement about the fact that the conditions were going to be captured what you were saying to us was that staff was supporting this softer approval on the buffer, and it would be as appropriate based on the drawing.
Correct.
So the connection I wanted to make was you made that statement, is then that further defined by 3A.
So I do not make a reference to the more detailed landscape plan, but if you would like to make that amendment, that would be totally fine to include that landscape plan
Okay.
in the condition. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Also, in your presentation, would you go back to it's one of the first slides. It's the one where it's showing the TR areas. One more, please. One
Right
more.
here?
Nope, keep going. Keep going. Here. We don't have this in our deck with your description of TR and AG1.
It actually is in the staff report, the description. Now this exact map may not have the same
we have the map.
identifications, but we have a current zoning map in the staff report.
No, what I'm suggesting is this particular slide that you've shown, we have the depiction of the map in our deck. What I
Right.
don't have is the depiction of the map with the benefit of your
The
TR and
verbiage.
AG1 language
That's
to the
correct.
right.
Yeah,
And
you're
that's,
correct.
if there's a chance to have that kind of slide in the future available to us, this is very helpful for me
Okay,
for
sure.
some points I want to be able to discuss tonight. I don't want to lose that, but I don't have that.
Okay. I didn't make a hard copy of it, so.
Okay, we may have to come
you
back
can-
to it. I'll
Yeah,
just-
if you want to,
You know
I'll
what?
bring it
Hang
back
on.
up at
Let
the
me
time.
I'll take a picture of it.
Oh, that's a great idea. Technology. So this was the idea of our director when we were getting ready for city council, so to describe each zoning district.
Okay, I think I've got
Okay,
it.
great.
Thanks, Robin.
Okay, do you have stick it in?
More than one, but I'll
Okay.
transfer one.
Guys have a whole dog and pony show.
Mine's short, hopefully.
So just to let everybody know, so we'll have 10 minutes of the applicant, and anybody who wants to speak in favor of the application, they will have 10 minutes, and then anybody in opposition after they're finished will have an opportunity to speak. So I have one card right now in opposition, so just as well as the applicant. And if,
The applicant and those supporting have a combined total of 10 minutes.
correct,
Yep.
yes.
I'm just going to pull up the two that I need.
And the same would hold true for opposition. They have a combined
Correct.
12 to 10 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. Steve Rowe with AEC, 50 Warm Springs Circle. I'm here representing Bayesian American Properties. With me, I've got Kerry Krause, who's the architect, and I've got Corey Jones, who is the owner of the property. Robin's done a great job of kind of detailing what changed on the site plan from where we were probably a month and a half, 2 months ago to where we are today. I just wanted to point out some of the details about the changes and kind of highlighting. We were able to extend this buffer to 35 feet all the way around this area. You can see that on there if you can. All the way around, and even including this area. When we made the turn at the detention pond was where we had to pinch it down to 20. So the areas where it gets really small is really at their detention pond where it has the least amount of impact to the surrounding neighbors. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. And then as we came back around the corner to where we were backing right up to these townhomes, we were able to extend it back out and get it back to the 30 feet in those areas.
Isn't it 20 at the far end?
Over on this end or here?
At the extreme right.
In this area, actually, we were able to pull it off, so we're planting right up against that site. And what I wanted to kind of point out is we didn't take it all the way down here just to point out the time frame we had, but this would be extended all the way across. Just this little corner of the alley gets into that buffer area. So we would heavy up the landscaping on those areas, but we used predominantly evergreen materials. We were probably 75% evergreen, 25% deciduous, had a good mixture of variety so that as it aged, it would actually condensify versus being a monoculture of one type of plant all the way across, creating the green wall. With regards to the fence issue, I think we're not object to a fence. I think if the homeowners next to us would like a fence, we'll put one up. We just have to work out what that material is, make sure its longevity is there, and then it looks good throughout the duration of both projects. At this point, if you got any, I can answer any questions you have on the site plan. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Kerry to kind of give you some more details about the materials and the percentages and the various issues that we're having with the form-based, or not form-based code, but the Highway 9 overlay. Okay.
Not at this time.
I would suggest that you wait for the questions after they're done with their presentation, so
Okay.
you don't get into their time.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm actually, the clocks were off, so I'm taking time, so I don't want you to think
Okay.
with the audience or yourselves.
Thanks, Robin.
So they have about 7 minutes and 50 seconds left, so.
Okay.
These clocks are always on, so I'm like, sorry.
Hello, I'm Kerry Krause. I'm the architect and designer of the community Malou.
And if you give your address, please.
And I live at 3464 Roxborough Road in Atlanta, 30326. So in front of you, you have the site plan with the home sites color-coded. So each code and color represents some of the detailed information that I provided on other documents that you'll see. I provided a materials schedule. And so when you see these colors on your materials schedule, you will see those color blocks. So you'll understand what each unit on the site plan represents as far as its entire exterior materials selection. And I also took that same color coding and created a design plan document. So you'll see each color code at the top, and you'll see the door that has been selected, the water table that's been selected, the walls, any specialty details like chimney pots and things of that nature, so you can get a real sense of the materials being used, because really that's what we're talking about in this whole conversation with this variance. We're talking about an aesthetic for this community that mimics and echoes what's throughout Milton already. We're dealing with a contention here that this property did not get included in the form-based code zoning. So that's really the tension here. If it had been, we wouldn't be in front of you right now. The materials that have been selected are beautiful, and they do represent Milton all throughout, and I will show you images throughout your entire community of brand new homes that have just gone up with these materials that I'm suggesting. So with that being said, are there any questions about this site plan?
And we'll hold our questions again
Okay,
until
great.
you're finished with
Great.
your presentation.
I didn't see where you are on everything else. Yeah, I couldn't find my document.
Which one do you need?
So yeah, do the note, the design plan. Where are mine?
paused it while you're doing it.
Oh, okay.
Nope,
Yeah, nope,
that's
that's not it.
You can escape out of that.
Thank
There you
you.
go. The
I'm trying to get to
Yeah.
your.
Oh, there they are. There they are, right there. Yeah, I can do it from here now. Thanks. Okay. There you go. Okay, so you'll see the color code at the top. So that's a deeper coral that represents all of these home sites in the deep coral. I've given you their site numbers at the top, and I've also brought them over to the site plan and also brought those numbers over to the schedule, which you'll see there's a lot of data here. And it was really just to do due diligence so you'll know exactly what we plan for this community. So you'll see the wall material selection. It's actually a cement siding that is colored through. I have samples of it so you can see it. It's a remarkable product with a 25-year warranty on it. I'm an environmental architect. That's my specialty. I went to school in San Francisco, and so most of the materials are LEED certified, and so there's a lot of environmental consciousness happening here. The roof is synthetic slate. It's a composite. It has a 50-year warranty. This community will endure for a long time. Its aesthetic will look new for many, many years. The water table and chimney material is a stone. Again, I have the example, the sample over here. It's a ledge stone, and it's a beautiful natural material. I show you the windows, and I'm not sure if you want to go through all of these. I'll just quickly fly through them so you can see that every single slide represents a specific unit. The units are listed at the top, but it shows you all the materials that are being used. So you can see there are natural materials throughout every single unit. There's a lot of natural woods. The lintels and sills are limestone. The roofs are synthetic. Again, that was for endurance and for low maintenance. We have metal standing seam roofs that have a 45-year warranty on them. These walls right here on this slide are stone. It's kind of interesting. I'm used to researching. A lot of my work is international, so a lot of the materials that I have resources and have exposure to are not, heavily used here in the States, but they're remarkable products. They're stone products, and they have very long warranties on them, and they're environmental, the way that they're manufactured, the way that they're freighted here. So I'm very excited to share that with you if you care to know about all that at the end. Now we have solid wood truss lintels. On some of these details, we have obviously brick. That's a staple for Milton. Again, I want to go back to that one because I used a lot of equestrian architectural elements in the shutter design, the door designs. A lot of the aesthetic was inspired by Milton's history. All right, so that's that detail. So what I'm going to do now is take you to the schedule. It is very detailed. More data than you probably care to go through this evening, but that there outlines every material on the exterior that's being used. And the code currently with where this property is sitting has, I feel it's been misappropriated, quite honestly, because especially with knowing what's going to happen in your community, this will become eventually the North Corridor off of 400 for Milton. I feel that this development, since it will be the very first thing that, people who come off of 400 in the future into your community, I feel this community should represent what's throughout Milton. It seems strange to me to have it represent an old code program. all brick. There's so many beautiful residents throughout here. Your library is beautiful. There's a lot of this building, this whole facility is beautiful, but it does represent material uses I'm suggesting. So, I don't really know much of the history of how that all happened. I'm not from here, but I do want to state that as a hardship case that I doubt anyone wants us to go backwards architecturally, aesthetically. And that's really what you're asking us to do by going along with that old code. So this is detailed. You can go through it if you want. But, Robin and Bob asked for specifics, and so I gave them specifics. Oh, this is just a quick slide that I did just for fun. I've driven through your community. I love eating at your restaurants here, and it was just I had to chuckle and laugh. It's almost the levity of it all that we're here tonight asking for this variance when I drive through your city, I'm seeing
1
things.
minute left.
I'm seeing things I want to build. I mean, this right here, many of the home sites will look just like the library. I will show you renderings actually that we had Tracy Ward present. These are communities that are already here. Now, this is just masonry at the water table, and it's all siding. I listed the image, I put the image as well as the name of the community. I'll just fly through them very quickly because it's pretty telling. I mean, this Milton Run is exactly what we're trying to create. I feel we're a little bit more current with our aesthetic, but it's very similar. And Woodwinds, the Enclave, these are all homes that have been built within the past couple years. Just for the sake of it.
10 minutes. So.
Do you remember, are you all?
Sorry, I have to interrupt you.
Sure.
So 10 minutes have expired.
Yep.
How much longer do you think you need to complete your presentation so we give you the full benefit?
That's really up to you. We have materials if you want to come see them based on, what the data that I've given you. I have the renderings that you've already seen. We don't have to review those, so I'll just leave it up to you. How much more information you feel you need.
You thought 5 more minutes?
I'm thinking.
Yeah. It's interesting too. We've presented.
We just need to. Is everybody okay with 5 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, let's use that as our benchmark.
Great.
At this point.
Thank you. And we've presented to you folks before, and we've had favorable responses from you, from the different boards, the design review board, the planning review board, the community behind us. Hidden Force has been such a phenomenal advocate for us. We partnered with them right out of the gate before we even designed the community. So, I don't really know what all I can add to this conversation. Other than just answering questions and showing you the physical samples.
All right. Is there another portion of the presentation, or does that complete your presentation?
That completes it for mine.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other aspect from the other gentlemen who are here this evening?
I don't
No?
have any other cards,
Okay.
so. Okay, I have one speaker in opposition, MC Garamani. Do you want to come up and?
Good evening. My name is MC Garamani. I'm a resident at Spring Valley Townhomes, and I'm also a member of the board of our board. And I've lived there for 17 years. And Mr. Osher is also a member of the board. And it's a very nice, quiet neighborhood. And of course, before City of Milton became city, we voted for City of Milton with great enthusiasm. And we appreciate you all do for us to preserve our parks and streams and buffers. Myself, I'm a civil engineer with over 30 years' experience. I've designed subdivisions, commercial sites for several consulting firms such as Precision Planning, Southern Civil Engineers, and so forth. I had my own consulting firm. And my biggest concern is the reduction in the 75-foot undisturbed buffer. A buffer, for those who don't know what the buffer, undisturbed buffer is, I'm sure you all know it, it's a protected portion of a lot set aside for open space and or visual screening purposes. Undisturbed buffers help separate different use districts or separate one property from another property. Undisturbed buffers may not be graded they must be fully protected, keeping all vegetation and trees as is. Typically, the only vegetation that can be removed is invasive plants such as bamboo and English ivy. In some cases, it's acceptable to add additional vegetation or trees to an undisturbed buffer, but not only to be removed. This project is proposing 54 townhomes. I think, based on my experience, 51 units will yield more than $3 to $3.5 million net profit. Add another 3 units in undisturbed buffer that right now there are deer, there are turtles, there are wetlands. To add another 150 to 200,000 of profit to destroy the environment is highly unacceptable, in my opinion. And I think I don't mind for development and enhancing our areas. It's inevitable, but greed is no good. 3 units in an area that is undisturbed and it houses those deers. I feed the deers. I got pictures I'll show you. Turtles and squirrels and all the rabbits, and I feed them. And I think, since they can't speak, I'm going to speak on their behalf. They don't have a place to go. And I think that 3 units being placed in the middle of the southern portion, which is Haddam Forest, and us, is just not a good practice. As an engineer, I know, in my career, I've never, ever, working for private sector, ever encroach an undisturbed buffer to place a permanent structure purely for profit purposes. Now, it could be encroached for a purpose of extending a utility line, such as sewer, some to serve the upstream property for a petition sewer or so forth, or septic failure, but not just because of greed. So I completely disagree with the request of having this 51 units will yield plenty of profit for the applicant, and more than what we all make throughout our lifetime, I assume. There are also several things I highlighted here about putting the 35-foot landscape strip along Haddam Forest. Along our side, we're only getting 20 landscape strip, actually, and a driveway, which is the northern portion of the undisturbed buffer, and to the eastern portion, we get 35 foot. Like I said, I don't want to give you a headache, and I'm sure you all have great conscience. And I think greed is no good. We always said there are 3 poisons that are a foundation of our downfall and suffering: greed, anger, and foolishness. And I think I appreciate your time and listening to me, and please take that into consideration on behalf of the deer and rabbits and squirrels and the birds. I think let's keep that undisturbed buffer. The wetlands, there are trees, specimen trees, and please take that into consideration. I appreciate your time.
Great, thank you. I actually have a quick question for you.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. The concern that you have primarily is on if I'm looking at the depiction of the development, it's the 3 units in particular, or are you in opposition to?
Yes, sir. The 3 units they are proposing to put in the undisturbed buffer, which is the 75-foot. Yep. They're requesting a variance for reduction from 75-foot undisturbed buffer to a 20-foot landscape strip. And that's the one I don't mind this development. I mean, it's inevitable. Mm-hmm. And as long as they adhere to your standards, and I know traffic is going to be a major issue. There's going to probably additional 120, 130 additional cars on a daily average traffic on a very constrained, limited area. We've got 2 lanes. So that's beyond me. I'm just concerned about these 3 units that's going to be placed on this. I always say putting an elephant inside a Volkswagen.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chairman, while this gentleman was speaking, a person in support had come up to give me a card. So they have 4.5 minutes left based on the 5 minutes that you gave in addition.
Oh, okay.
If you would want.
Then
okay.
We'll allow that.
So Mr. Colin Mim, I believe.
Were there any other speakers in opposition?
That was it. Yeah. What? I'm sorry. There's some other people.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, then let's complete the.
Oh, that's what you guys. Okay. I'm sorry. So, yeah, go ahead. I don't have any more cards.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Colin Murray. I live at 140 Peacock Way. which is one of the single-family homes in Eden Forest. I just wanted to say two things. Robin alluded to there was no fence between our property and the applicant's property. And your documentation does actually point to a fence that we've agreed to with the applicant. So I didn't want that to slip through the cracks. And the second thing I want to tell you is I've lived there for 6 years. I have 2 small children. And we've kind of monitored the developments that the applicant has put forward. And in our opinion, and I think I speak for 6 of the other single-family homes, that this is the best opportunity we think we've seen being presented. And we're in full favour of this development going ahead. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And that's it.
Okay, then we'll close public comment on this case. Thank you. So at this time, it's appropriate to ask questions of staff or the applicant. I'll open just the table in general rather than going by name.
Well, I'd like to start with a question for the applicant. Last time you were here, we spoke about parking, and there was nothing said about that today. I thought you might have some in your cart, right. But
let me address some of that, and also I want to address some of the concerns of the homeowner that came up regarding the buffers. I'm trying to get to the right site plan here. Sorry. In reworking the site plan, we actually have extended, we've shortened some of the front yards a little bit and created 18-foot driveways in most of the units to be able to allow the visitors of those units to be able to park in the driveway itself. We're also right now looking at other areas where we can tuck in parking spaces throughout the development off of alleys and teeing into areas like this, not here, but areas like this where we could just sneak in 1 or 2 little things in the grass pavers or other somewhat type of alternative situation. And I fully understand, I just want to address these concerns of the homeowner. The area he's talking about is here, which actually backs up to this detention pond. But the reduction of the buffer is mainly for the hardship of, one, the shape of the property. And the other thing I want to point out is the only reason that there is a buffer between this property and the other property is because it's in the Highway 9 overlay. If these were 2 TR properties that abutted up to each other, there would be 0 buffer between the 2. So this is really, we're giving him 35 feet more than would be in a normal situation in these, or 20 feet depending on where it is. But these units backing up to the detention pond we felt was really not an impact to the development because it is an area that's not inhabited. It's actually a neglected pond and isn't really well taken care of. So.
Can I add something? Sure. So it actually backs up to 0.54 acres owned by Hidden Forest. Beyond that...
Actually, please state your name and address for the record.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, Corey Jones, 14430 Wyndham Farms Drive in Milton.
Great, thanks, Corey.
Yeah. Lived here 19 years. So, this right here is not the detention pond. This right here is 0.54 acres that's owned by Hidden Forest. On the other side of that, over here, that's the detention pond. And that's Spring Valley. So this section does not actually back up to Spring Valley.
Okay.
Can you comment on that, please? Yeah.
No.
Actually, no, I'm sorry, you can't. Ron, were you finished with your question about the parking?
Essentially, he's said that they haven't provided for any parking. So I think I've got my answer. You weren't prepared for the meeting, my view.
Robin, on the one of the considerations presented to us on page 16 of the original deck that we had for consideration was from the City of Milton Fire Marshal, where it says roads shall be a minimum of 26 feet from back of curb to back of curb, or if less, shall be posted no parking signs and curb painted red. And if I'm interpreting what we've seen even in the revised plan, the maximum width of any drive I'm seeing, I think, is 22 feet. Is that correct?
I don't have one right in front of me, but if that's the
Okay.
dimension.
Well, I can ask about. So is there a legitimate disconnect between what the fire marshal is suggesting the minimum requirement is and the fact that we're looking at 22 feet? And I recognize the fire marshal's condition says unless it's going to be painted and posted no parking.
Right, I can have the applicant's engineer address that, what the
Okay.
plan is.
Yeah, given the constraints of the site, we absolutely intend to no on-street parking in front of the units, and we would post it no parking and work with the fire marshal on accessible routes. We have been working with him on creating turnaround areas where we've got adequate widths for them to get into the alleys, no more than 100 feet to 50 feet of backing. So we have been working with Matt Marietta and trying to get all this worked out.
And so what does that begin to look like? I mean, we're being asked to consider a plan before us that, you know, we expressed some concern to you last time about the narrowness of the streets, the concern for on-street parking, the fact that we stated there was inadequate parking. We asked for consideration before you got to mayor and council last time for a parking plan that contemplated those things, and we're still at a loss for any of those in our reconsideration. So did you just dismiss the preparation for this evening's meeting?
No, we were actually working
May I finish
more.
my thought, please? Did you just dismiss us this evening in anticipation of the mayor and council meeting, or how should we swallow that when that was an expressed significant concern of ours?
In preparation for this meeting, the biggest concern that we had in working with the homeowners and Robin was getting the buffer as big as we could get it and still maintain the development. In working with you, I was able to get a lot of the driveways to 18 feet to accommodate the guest parking for those units, and that we were going to work as we went through the engineering and the final
But you're making a
piece
pretty
of it.
broad-based assumption with that. And I think about the way a lot of today's homeowners are living when you're on these are all slab, these are not basement supported.
No, some of these are. Some of these are drive-unders, absolutely.
Okay. Well, drive-unders, but no basement.
We haven't gotten to that level of detail, but the depth of some of these would facilitate some level of basement or living on that piece, yes.
Okay. Well, unless it's 80 or 90%, my point still remains the same, and that is that the kind of living that we're seeing in people who are occupying these homes, that a lot of the storage space without the benefit of a basement becomes their garage. And so at least one, if not both cars in a two-car environment are on the skirt of the presentation of the driveway. So we really haven't fixed the parking problem, even with adding a couple more driveway spans when we've expressed it as a significant concern of ours with parking overall.
The intent of this, though, is not to have cars parking out in driveways that are the residents. The residents would be using garages, and we can work with that through
I understand that intent, but the
docks.
reality is, if you look at the application across Milton, in an environment similar to this, the garage has become the storage space, and the cars are in the driveway. So you have to contemplate that as a reality in the application for the occupants here. And then you haven't resolved the parking problem then. You've made an assumption, but you really haven't addressed the parking concern that we expressed.
Well, again, it's part of the process we would go through in the design process with relating to the grading, relating to the stormwater, relating to the fire access. All of it goes hand in hand, and this is really just a land use issue that we're dealing with.
What you're asking is, to make a serious consideration to change the way this zoning works for setbacks to accommodate a very intense use. This is a very different conversation tonight than we had the last time because of the difference of the benefit of the new information that addresses the setbacks. So before, there was an assumption that this density could be met because those setbacks were already a part of the contemplated plan. Now, it has more of the feel of 10 pounds of development in a 5-pound lot. And you're asking us to give that consideration that all these things are just going to be accepted, and they're not. Without some serious answers from you guys where you've contemplated those things, I don't know how we can support that.
I don't see that this is an overdevelopment of the site. It's actually, it's compressed inward to get the benefit to the surrounding residents and to work with them. But the parking problem is something I feel like we can solve as we go forward. Again, having the majority of the units along the front having 18-plus foot driveways with full width adds 2 more cars to each of the units, plus the 2 cars in the garage. There are ways to work within the alleys to add additional parking through pervious means, which would be our preference to not take away from green space. So again, all of those are issues that we can solve, will solve as we go through the process, because the worst thing that can happen to us is develop something that we don't sell. And that's something that we are cognizant of.
We're here to help make sure you don't do that.
Right. And part of our issue is we're going to make sure that people use their garage spaces for cars and not storage. We can do that through an HOA docs. We can do that through enforcement, which we've done on several projects throughout not necessarily this city, but throughout the metro area.
And what kind of verbiage would you suggest that can control that?
It's within our CCRs. If the garage needs to be primarily used for cars that are not part of the residents are going to be parked in the garages. If not, you have X number of hours to get them in. And if not, then enforcement takes over. It becomes an enforcement issue within the HOA.
Okay. Just add to my concern, when we talked last time, we were applauding the aesthetics are terrific. And we spent a lot of time talking about that last time. Mm-hmm. We expressed a concern and denied that section on the aesthetics because you guys hadn't really come prepared to discuss that with us. I know you were still working with the city architect, and I'm glad you guys continue to do that. I applaud Ms. Krause. You guys have done some great work on that, and thank you for, I think, generating something that is consistent with where we'd like the look and feel to go for Milton. This is the next generation of a very important product that Milton needs, and it's consistent with, like you said, some of the more recent building in Milton. But what's inconsistent for me is the intensity of it, what appears to be a further reduction of green space. I mean, you've found a way in the expansion of in some areas to still squeeze in another unit as well. And yet we're talking about, too, whether it's pervious or impervious surfaces, to squeeze in a couple of parking spaces. That will, again, reduce the green space. We know that in order to accommodate some of this, staff has recommended the extraction of some of the trail plan that was originally contemplated that I think would have been an amenity. Mm-hmm. Those things are all going in the wrong direction for me. I don't know how I can overcome that tonight with what I'm being shown so far on the rationale behind it. I'm not really hearing anything grounded in a feel-good for me to give you the benefit of the doubt on that when it's still so much work in progress. Well, a lot of the I will say, in answering the green space issue, there were no units added to this plan. So within the green space issue, we actually had to shift green space from internal to external. Well, what happened? I mean, the pathway between units 26 and 33 went away. Again, and that was because of the compression of the site. We actually pushed those 2 buildings together. Okay, and compression of the site to accommodate the landscape buffer? To accommodate the landscape buffers, yes, sir. So the green space got shifted from an internal space for the benefit of the residents within this development to the benefit of the external residents within the landscape buffer. So we were making cognitive, decisions so we were going to have to really dress these areas up that are left within our own green space to make sure that they're usable, which they are. We have several places where we've still got our green belts between the units, where we've got green space that connects. We specifically took the trail out at request of the city in that floodplain area to protect that buffer and wetland area. So again, we're trying to work and accommodate the city staff requests and actual comments. And then the street trees out here on the street, there's 3 large oaks that are still being preserved. Yep. So we're really trying to make a good faith effort to do this. Now, if there's things specifically that you want us to look at and possibly bring back to you, we're happy to do that and take the next level of design work. But essentially, we were solving the problems we thought you had the biggest issues with this go-round. And and thank you for that commitment to that as maybe being the process. We certainly don't want to slow down the timeline. We know we've already asked you to go full circle on this, and if we can accommodate a way to get there tonight, we'll of course try to do that. That's our objective is to make sure that we're not standing in your way, but ensuring that we're adherent to the things that we've set as standards by which Milton is supposed to be developed. I would like to know more about the comment that you made with regard to working with the fire chief about turnarounds and widths. Can you share some more with me about that, please?
In dealing with him, some of these stub streets, we had to work specifically, and if they extended beyond 150 feet, we had to connect them through. This was one of those areas where this street was just too long, and he had asked us, because we had this just stopping, he said, if you can make that a pull through, that would really help out. These buildings will most likely be sprinkled because of their proximity within this.
Say that again to me, please.
Most of these buildings will most likely probably be sprinkled given how tight they are and the construction types. And that helps us with the fire marshal as well. And again, giving him adequate area to lay down, pull hose pulls, spacing of hydrants, all of that goes into play as we go through this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll defer at the moment to somebody else who's got more questions.
Okay. I've got a few questions. As you know, there's some real criteria that we have to go through in order to grant variances.
Yes, sir.
It's very clear. There's 4 pieces to it. And I guess from my own knowledge, I try to go back and, one of the big pieces, and I think that only got the negative vote last time, was the hardship piece. And
on the architecture specifically?
On the zoning and on the setbacks, and because we're being asked, and one of the things says clearly, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. So in order for us to vote on this, I need to understand that hardship. And if I go back and I look at the timing that we've been given, I'm sure I'm missing a few things, but from what I could tell, this started back in 2007, roughly.
Thereabouts, yes, sir.
And then I know Hidden Valley was built in the March to December timeframe in 2008, and then in April of 2008, that's when the city came in and said, okay, these are the buffers. This is now the 75-foot undisturbed buffer, the 10-foot improvement setback, and that was done in April of 2008. And then in July, this was submitted in July 1st of 2008 for the rezoning request. And then I saw in November 2008, the 3 different lots on Bethany Bend and the remaining parcels within the request are under contract contingent on approved zoning. And then, so we're going through this, and I'm trying to understand. Then in 2008, the thing I'm trying to wrap my head around as far as hardship goes, I think that staff did too, was there were some floodplains, that floodplains were increased by 1.4 acres from what was when, if we go back to when you acquired or thought about acquiring. So, okay, and that's done by FEMA.
Right, not done by us.
So it's not done by the city. Mm-hmm. So again, I need to know what the city's role historically, or has there been any precedent set of when FEMA comes in and change it? Do we have to allow for that? In this case, they took 1.4 acres out, so it reduced the buildable land. I mean, is that up to the city to make allowances and variances? Is that a hardship to where the city, is that a viable hardship for the city to approve the variance? Does that make sense? Am I saying that correctly?
I think essentially you're saying if FEMA makes a rule change, do we have to abide by the rule change? Is that what you're asking?
Does the city have to then allow other variances on buffers to allow the same buildable space? I don't know if we do.
I'm going to defer to your city attorney on that.
Yeah, I don't know. There's probably no black and white answer, of course.
Right. I certainly wouldn't anticipate that being a per se hardship. Certainly a factor that you could take into consideration, but nothing that would dictate a mandatory outcome.
Okay.
So the city's not obligated to make an accommodation because of FEMA's action that reduced the buildable land. It does not then generate a hardship that the city is considering It's just that there is, by FEMA's declaration, less buildable land.
It's a factor that you can consider, but it's not going to dictate an automatic outcome. In other words, I wouldn't see it, and certainly not in this case, as being a per se hardship.
Okay. And again, I love the research you guys did on Milton. I do think this is updated. I do like the work you've done with the architect, and I think this would be a very good addition. The issue I'm having is we've got to vote up and down based on what we have here, and this is not included in our packet. All of those aren't included in our packet. So if we take away a variance, we're blue skying. And at that point, you could do anything you want because it's not specified. And I think we talked about this last time too with the materials. If you go in front of, when you go in front of city council to have those materials and to specify this is what we're going to, because all we're saying now is what we have here is I want to get away with those rules, those conditions. And there's nothing that we're going to. So it makes it hard to vote. We're just voting to remove something and not replace it with something that is, in everybody's mind, probably a better product.
Right.
So I think that's one of the challenges I have. So,
and I would defer to staff to maybe how to solve that too. I'm not sure I'd have an answer on that.
And the other thing is, the area about the 26-foot roads, I would hate to see this whole subdivision with red curbs. I don't know if that's something they can get around, but if that's what the fire marshal said, anything under 26 has all red painted curbs and no parking signs, I think that'd be a travesty. I mean, I think that'd look horrible. I think you guys would probably be.
There's other ways we can solve that. I've done it in other jurisdictions with some creative signage and then maybe like a brick stripe on top of the curb and some things that look a little better. So there's some aesthetic ways to solve that.
Okay. Again, I'd definitely be willing to that. But again, I think I need something to vote for. I want to vote for these materials in place of this. I want to understand the hardship again. Where in your mind does the hardship come in to accept the change of buffers?
The biggest issue is one, obviously the floodplain. Two, the shape and configuration of the property, which was really not our doing. It's just kind of what's left, the remnant piece. And to be able to successfully develop that, because when you take the buffers to their full limit, I'm really not left with much to develop in the center. It's really a true hardship. And if this were not in the Highway 9 overlay, I would not have the buffers at all either. So if I was just a straight TR outside of the Highway 9 overlay, I'd be able to do what we're doing. Actually, I could get more aggressive to the property lines with what I'm doing. So.
Good.
When you originally purchased the property and got the option on the other parcel, were you aware that it was in the overlay?
We were.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We got a site plan approved, and nobody mentioned at that time that there was this buffer, even though it had been approved in April. And we got approved for our property later in the year, November, December.
I think it was just an oversight between us and staff because the ordinance had come in so late.
But the site plan was approved.
Mike, so we can get
right. Yeah, the timing of the ordinance being approved and the timing of us doing our pre-application meeting and all the things that go into pulling together a zoning package, I think it just got lost in the shuffle on both staff's end and our end. And just the need for it wasn't pointed out, and we didn't pick up on it as well.
Yeah, my only point was that it was approved as a site plan. Mm-hmm. We have approval as site plan. Nobody mentioned the buffer. We would have dealt with it then had we known, and we wouldn't have bought the property if it was an issue. Yeah. So this became an issue after the fact, even though that was already there before the fact.
But at that time, you didn't request a variance either.
And we didn't. Yeah, we weren't aware that there was a need for one.
Nobody told us we needed to.
So.
The public discussion began in 2007. When did you begin your contemplation of buying the property? We're doing a project there.
Sure, 2007 would have been when we worked about 18 months on the project.
Okay.
And we got approved exactly what we needed, and then we closed on the property. We bought it.
I'm going back to the public discussion of the buffers. They occurred initially in this forum, Planning Commission, in September of 2007. You're a resident of Milton. I would have assumed you would have been aware of those discussions, the public nature of them, the announcement. You weren't, though.
So I was living in Alpharetta at the time. I live here in Milton now, but it was not a discussion. The 75-foot buffer was not a discussion in the public forum. Nobody discussed it, not until recently this year.
Actually, in the next one, it was in the request. So the one that was withdrawn.
Yeah, the one
it was made.
The original
yeah.
when
That's 2014.
No, I know.
So it wasn't mentioned until 2014, which we withdrew. So, yeah.
Any other questions for staff or for the applicant? Actually, I have a question for the applicant. The gentleman that expressed the concern over the three units that are bumping up against the more limited buffer.
Yes, sir.
Is there any accommodation that you can think about in the request that he has made for?
Since it's the first time we've heard from him on that, I can take a look at that and see what can be done. How aggressive can we get on pulling that off of that property line?
Yeah, because I do think you guys did a good job with the Hidden Valley with the owners, getting 5
Right.
out of the 8 that are adjacent to the property. They're all, I appreciate you guys going to that length to get them and to get the signatures and do all that. So I think that stands out in my mind.
It may very well be that, we're not here tonight to negotiate what
Right.
that looks like, but just something for your contemplation is if you were to rework the front versus the back of that. I know you don't want the front of the home to be on what is now the alley side of that, but that private drive that's depicted between units 26 and 27, et cetera, were to benefit both that side of it as well as whatever it is, 23, 4, and 5.
Right.
Maybe that's a way you can bring those units closer to the private road side of it, and maybe the alleyway gets reworked so that there's more buffer there. I would just ask that you guys give that some consideration.
We can take a look at that.
I think the gentleman makes a good point. You're doing your best to accommodate greater depth of buffer in some other areas, and it'd be a shame to not give that same consideration to a homeowner who's expressed some concern.
A quick question for staff. Robin, am I correct that the current buffer and setback ordinance applies to every point along the perimeter of this parcel, sides, backs, and so
Correct.
forth?
It's the same, consistent for acres that are more than 4 acres at 75 foot on all property, adjacent to all property lines. If it's 4 or less acres, or less than 4 acres, it's 50 feet and a 10-foot improvement setback, yeah.
Then the current buffer and setback requirements treat all of the adjacent property owners equally.
Correct. So the code reads such that it says residential. It doesn't differentiate between multifamily residential or single-family residential. It just states if it's a residential use, then a buffer would have to be provided.
Okay. As we know, as we've discussed before, the buffer now on the proposed site plan differs along the perimeter. In one area, it's the 85 feet, the 75 plus the 25,
right,
and 30, 35, 20, and so forth. I know staff has supported this variance, and I'd like to understand your thinking, how you came to the conclusion that you could go forward here, given that under this, we would now be treating adjacent homeowners differently.
I just believe that the intent is to provide a separation, and I would make the argument whether it was, most of the development is concentrated toward the northern portion. Obviously you have the floodplain and preserving the trees on the southern portion, so it forces I can't say it would be exactly 4 acres. I don't think it is. But I would make an argument that when we made that amendment, and even back when we copied it from the Northwest, or what's now rural Milton, of that differentiation between below 4 acres and above 4 acres. This could as easily been a 4-acre property or less than 4 acres and have a 50-foot. And then the difference between 50 foot and 35 feet for the majority of it, especially for those residents that are single family detached. I think that makes an argument that you have to look at, providing that screening that would be appropriate, that would meet. I mean, it doesn't meet the regulation, but it meets the intent that they have provided sufficient enough and the type of material to provide a appropriate buffer. So, and as I said in the report, it's the shape and configuration of the lot as a whole. I mean, it's a difficult site that no matter what is developed, unless it's detached single family of some sort, that a buffer would be required. So, and between that and, it's my opinion as staff, I mean, obviously the attorney has said something a little bit different, that having a floodplain increase by a certain amount, in my parochial type thinking, is that that's not anything that was caused by the applicant. It was just the force of nature. But, that's my opinion of what I consider partly of a hardship. I'm not partly, but that's one of the items within the hardship. So.
Well, with regard to the buffers, I appreciate your sharing your thoughts. I'm still very troubled by the inequity of what's being proposed here for the various homeowners that are directly adjacent to this property. Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, I mentioned also, which even the Hidden Forest at the time that they were developed and zoned, they're supposed to be providing a 25-foot buffer between their single-family homes and the adjacent property, which at the time was AG1, as well as the townhomes to the north. They also, I look back, one of the commissioners had asked me that would be required to have a 25-foot undisturbed buffer and a 10-foot improvement setback, because again, when that was developed, obviously this northern piece was an AG1. So between all the buffers, or what should be buffers in some instances, that this would provide adequate screening that would meet the intent of why we have buffers between uses. So
I think you said on the Hidden Forest, they do not have the buffers that were supposedly required.
Correct. So
backyards.
so in those yards, there is yard, but there's not a visual buffer. There's separation, but there's no visual buffer.
Do we know if Spring Valley has continued or upheld
I have
the
not been
undisturbed
on
buffer?
their property, so
Okay.
you'd have to ask the resident if you wanted to.
Okay.
It looks like there's some vegetation, only because they don't really create their own yards in a townhouse, so I suspect that was probably a little bit easier to enforce.
One of the solutions that we haven't talked about that we would address some of the underlying theme of concern here with parking and buffers and setbacks is simply a reduction of the intensity of the development. Removing a couple of units or a realignment of the units fixes that. You get to the appropriate street width. You potentially add some parking, and you accommodate the buffer plan. Even though we're asking for a reduced plan, you would potentially not have to have any areas that have to be considered for that. I guess I would just ask the applicant, were there other iterations of this that you guys considered that had a unit or 2 or 3 or 5 less that still, I know that there has to be math to make it work. You have to have a certain yield to make an investment make sense. But are there other plans that could be presented to the mayor and council for consideration.
We can look at it, but we tried to actually, if you notice, like in areas like this, we've increased the unit size and not gone to the bare minimum. So and from the last proposal, which was, I think, was at 77 or 78 units, we're down to 54. So we've actually made quite a number of concessions, tried to give a variety of product within this.
I think there's a great trade-off in that. When you talk about what the product is on a per unit basis, I think you do a great service to your product as well as to the community when you've got that kind of variance or variable available to the consumer at the end of the day. And yet, the last thing I want to do is build in some things by looking at something like this where it is so intense that we know we're just pushing along the problems from the Planning Commission for somebody else to solve.
Right. And again, I'm the engineer and the designer on this. I don't know the financial model that goes into this. I kind of work within the parameters that the client gives, and it may be something he can't answer tonight.
Right, and I recognize that. But in order for us to come to some sort of conclusion that everybody walks out feeling like they've been accommodated in some way, we only have 3 choices tonight.
Right.
We voted an affirmative. 4. We voted an affirmative with conditions. So 1 is affirmative. Second is affirmative with conditions. Another is denial, and the 4th is deferral.
Right.
So those are the things that are available to us tonight, and if we approve with conditions, all we're doing is pushing it down the road to somebody else to solve.
Right.
And that's then we're not necessarily doing our job.
I'd like to comment on that question that you just had.
Can you go to the mic, please, so we can make sure it gets in the record?
I wanted to comment on something that you just said because it actually is how I've been feeling since I joined this team. We have actually at our disposal more density, as Stephen has alluded, and we had, condominium options. We had all kinds of things, senior center developments. When I came on board, my biggest objective was to minimize and shrink the density so we could have more green space, more livable space. So when I got involved, I actually completely restructured the site plan. And I wanted green space all throughout it versus what it was when I got it was all sandwiched homes up to the street, to get the number so that you could have a viable product. I mean, he has to be able to make a profit on this, but that to me just did not look like it was in service to the community at all. And it didn't look like what you saw in Milton. So I created green space all throughout it, took about 20% of the units out. But what that has done is now we've added more green. And yeah, we can lower the density again, but we're just going to sandwich them in even more. And we blew them out and gave them more room. And as far as the buffer, I'm an environmental architect, so I deal with this a lot. With the landscaping plan, that is far greater of a buffer for these residents, which they all affirm and are very thankful for. They understand it too, that we're actually creating a much stronger buffer than if we had just given them 75 feet with a bunch of sticks on the land like that's there currently. I literally could see through it. They're going to have total privacy, and we probably will create an environment, an ecosystem for the deer, for the turtles, because of adding more of this green and more green space. And so from an environmental standpoint, which is what I've spent most of my career doing, I completely advocate this. And when I first saw the project that was approved, I didn't like it at all. And I said, I don't want to be part of that program. So I just wanted to make that comment from my perspective to help.
Great, thank you.
Well, again, I agree. I think this is a very good product overall. The issue I have is in order to approve it, I need to substantiate what is that hardship to go from the buffers. And, is it the wetlands, or the floodplain, reducing that? The shape of it, I mean, I have a difficult time with that because that's what you're buying. I mean, it's not like it's changed shape outside of the wetlands area. So I guess that's where I really need help in understanding what that hardship is.
Well, and keep in mind, when the product was purchased, the 75-foot buffer or the buffers in general were not contemplated as an oversight on both sides. So, I mean, that was an issue.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of it.
And again, obviously of the options, we'd love an approval, but if we need more time to look at it, we're not adverse to a deferral to study some of these issues a little further.
Okay, I'm delighted to hear you say that, because I think that will probably serve you better tonight. Yeah. I'm not for a minute speaking for our DS this evening,
right?
But I think, or hopefully what you're hearing is a verbalized struggle with how do we provide this product, which I think has benefit to Milton and our future consumers.
Right.
Without compromising some of the other integrity that we are charged with upholding. Part of that is the four pillars of our variance considerations, and hardship being the most difficult typically to address. Mm-hmm. Spirit and some of those things are easier, but the actual hardship is difficult. And so I'll offer some things to you for consideration, because, the truth be known, this is a dry run for the mayor and council. Their questions should be as hard or harder than ours.
Right.
We're a recommending body to them. They can do with our recommendations what they so choose. They can support it, they can toss it to the wind, they can modify it, et cetera. But for the purpose of that point, we're the dry run. So I would expect them to be asking you the same or harder questions than we're asking you. And they're going to be faced with the same dilemma that we're trying to address, or dilemmas that we're trying to address tonight. There's the accommodation of a concerned homeowner about the setback. There's the difference in variables. I don't know that we've had a lot of those where we're in 35 feet in one area, and to Mr. Gilbert's point that we're giving a different consideration to other homeowners. Who's the first-class citizen and who's the second-class citizen in that?
Right.
I'm and no pun intended, but I'm definitely concerned about the fire issue that comes with the inability to pass a fire truck through the narrow streets. If there's a happenstance parking, somebody's offloading something, and they're parked in a happenstance way on that street, and you've got a fire at the far end, and a fire truck can't get there, we have the risk of loss of life. Nobody wants that on their shoulders.
No.
I think there's a practical consideration that has to be given to the overall parking. And it sounds like you're giving some consideration of that, and thank you for doing that. But I don't know that there's a comfort that, at least that I've reached, and I'll let the others speak for themselves on it, that we've really addressed the parking concern on this, and ask you to consider that further.
Okay.
And then lastly, and there was another key point that I was going to make that's escaped me at the moment, is well, I'll let it slide for the moment. I'll come back to it. But prior to asking for a motion as to what we should be doing, we would be happy to entertain from the applicant the consideration of an appropriate deferral time, if you would be willing to consider that.
We would, and I think I could solve most of these problems within 30 days.
And I think we.
I just, from my side, I think I get my head around the hardship. I like the design, but the parking is a concern. I mean, there's just if these people, there's just no place for company, no place to, for any extra parking at all. I just think that's the biggest concern. But the other things I got my head around, but just the parking has to be addressed.
Okay.
I got my fourth point. There's actually an accommodation, or applause to you, and that is great work on the aesthetics. One of the concerns we had, and part of the reason there was a voice in, we recommended denial of the one section last time,
right,
was because of the unavailable material consideration. Not only have you guys done a good job of presenting it pictorially and through your charts, but I applaud the fact that you brought us some samples to consider tonight. I didn't hear anything. There's some clarification I would look forward to, and if we get a chance to do that in the next meeting, I'll save my questions for then. But I like the fact that it's natural stone. It's not manufactured. The only thing I think I heard manufactured was the roof, shingles or the slate appearing substance, and as well as I think some of the plank boards are manufactured, but it has the look of wood. So that was actually my fourth point was to say, good job.
And I think we can submit those boards and material samples to staff and get it into your packets and make it part of the official record if that helps.
I think that'd be important, because you're asking to remove this restriction. So again, give us something to vote for, because I think, again, I really believe this is going to be a great product. And you've done, just to piggyback on what Paul was saying, you guys have done a good job trying to work with us, trying to get, where we need to be on this. And I hope you guys understand, our hands are kind of tied with an up or down vote, really, based on these conditions. So
no, we've worked too hard
to
to kind of do an ultimatum like that. Oh. We really have, and I think we can still get better.
Mr. Earl, don't go away. Robin, I have a quick question for you. In the presentation of the building materials, although the materials are not necessarily accommodated by our current considerations for this area, by our current ordinance, are any of the materials inconsistent with a reasonable solution for application in other parts of Milton, where we've considered those for other areas and they're just not available to them in this area?
That's correct. So this small portion of the State Route 9 is totally different than any other area, even including Birmingham Crossroads, which is more the board and batten and the farm style with yes, so this is really the only anomaly, a few parcels that go up Bethany Bend, so yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just would say too, if maybe clarify the fence issue one way or another, when they come back, that
the fencing issue?
Yeah, either because they're still up in the air, whether the neighbors want the fence or don't want the fence. At least then that'll be another thing that'll be not up in the air for you. Yeah. And I have a question. I don't think you can answer it, but in the time you've owned the property, you've lost like an acre and a half or so as the wetlands has encroached. How do we know it's stopped? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just kind of an odd thing, but
Keeps on growing.
I mean, who's to say in 5-7 more years it doesn't encroach up and take another acre and a half? It's just a question, not a kind of a concern.
I can actually probably answer that. And if you notice where this floodplain line is now, this dark line, it was back closer to here, but as it gets further up, the slope steepens. So even, this was a very incremental rise in the floodplain, but because it was such a flat area, it extended quite a bit. Now we've hit an area where the grade is naturally rising, so each incremental rise from here on out will have a minuscule land area grab, so to speak.
It's more floodplain, not wetlands itself.
Correct. There is some wetlands in those areas which are going to be protected, but it's mainly a floodplain area.
So it's stopped, in a sense.
I wouldn't say it's stopped.
It just can't go.
It's a natural progression of development that floodplains will adjust. Things as simple as expanding a culvert downstream might actually lower the floodplain here. So I mean, it goes both ways. I've seen it go both ways depending on what the events have happened upstream.
I don't know what the water flow is for that area, but with the intensity of the development across the street in Forsyth, I know that you guys have to be giving careful consideration to water management, water mitigation as you're engineering your own runoff from this area.
Yes, the good news on this is the ridge line for this area is Bethany Bend Road and Strickland Road, so the development from across the street is all flowing in a different direction.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Earl, before I entertain a motion, I just want to ensure that I've heard you correctly, that you are willing to consider a deferral.
Absolutely.
It's not a hardship. We're not imposing a hardship if we move to a deferral.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just go back to my earlier recap. I think you've heard the underlying theme here of density, parking, green space, buffers, you've done a good job of addressing the surrounding community. We've got another homeowner here this evening I encourage you to engage with, if that's where we're going to end up going tonight. You've demonstrated to us that you've done that in the past. We just asked you to do it a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think you're hearing us trying to get to the point where we can help you get to where you will get the vote that you need from the mayor and council. And if we're all working in good faith towards that, I think we'll end up with a good result.
I do appreciate that.
Thank you. All right. If there are no more questions, I would be happy to entertain a motion.
Make a motion to defer Z 18-14, EC 1809 to the March Planning Commission meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lost the agenda.
So just before we finish, I just wanted to follow up. I believe that Commissioner Nolte was interested in doing the planning training with the, and I don't know, Sumet, have you gone to
I
that?
have not, but I don't know.
If you'll be able to
All
do
three
three, yeah,
days, that's the
right.
only thing
They're
that-
separated, yeah.
Yeah.
And Ron?
Count me in. This isn't this isn't the Fulton County one, is it?
Fulton County, what?
This isn't the one downtown, Fulton County.
Oh, you can use we're still in a meeting. You don't have to cover up.
Oh, okay.
It's down, I believe it's downtown.
They are. It's not at Prior Street like some of the ones in the past have been, but it's near there.
Yeah, I can't
When I
remember
read
exactly.
the-
It's usually at ARC, and I think they've moved
It is
to the
at-
Peachtree,
It's at
the
a
main
Peach-
Peachtree building where the MARTA station is.
So if it's not the one I went to before, I'd be happy to go.
Yeah,
That was
I can't.
Heather and I went to one last year that was 3 days.
Oh, it's the same one.
Oh, it's the same one?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can't keep track on who
Okay.
did what. So okay.
Then I'll pass.
Okay, so that's fine. So right now it's only Kurt. Okay, I just want to make sure. Cool. Any other announcements or?
Any other questions or comments
No.
this evening?
Okay.
If not, I'll
May
entertain
I
a motion to adjourn.
move that we adjourn?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.